The digital clock above the reception desk flickered, reading 11:47 p.m. when Leah Sterling felt the heavy weight of exhaustion press down on her shoulders. Her fingers glided across the computer keyboard with the same mechanical precision they had for the last 5 years, ever since she left the remote farmlands of Oklahoma to chase a life in the glittering chaos of New York City. The Grand Imperial Hotel breathed luxury. Crystal chandeliers hung from soaring ceilings. Italian marble covered the floor, and the scent of French lavender permeated the perfectly regulated air conditioning. But to Leah, it was all just the backdrop for another endless shift. She adjusted the collar of her white uniform blouse and tucked a rebellious strand of brown hair behind her ear. Her green eyes, an inheritance from the grandmother who raised her alone after her parents passed, held a stark mixture of weariness and quiet determination. At 23, Leah was the opposite of what the hotel represented. Simple, unassuming, almost invisible amidst the relentless shimmer. Then, the sound of footsteps echoed across the empty lobby. Leah lifted her eyes and felt a strange, cold grip tighten around her chest. A man strode through the lobby with a presence that seemed to siphon all the oxygen from the air. Tall, likely close to 6'1", he wore a bespoke navy suit that molded perfectly to his athletic physique. His dark hair was immaculately styled, and his sharp jawline showed a hint of rugged stubble, giving him the air of a man unconcerned with convention. But it was his eyes that truly paralyzed her. Deep, intense brown, the kind that seemed capable of deciphering secrets with a single glance. "Good evening," he said, his voice a low, resonant baritone that echoed like distant thunder. "Alexander Vance, I have a reservation." Leah blinked, forcing herself back into professional reality. "Good evening, Mr. Vance. One moment, please." Her fingers trembled slightly as she typed his name into the system. She knew that name. Everyone in the financial world knew that name. Alexander Vance was the corporate prodigy who, at 28, had built an investment empire, moving billions and transforming failed companies into market giants. Business magazines always plastered his photo on their covers with headlines about the relentless genius of high finance. "The presidential suite, 12th floor," Leah managed, extending the keycard. Their hands nearly touched during the exchange, and she felt a current of pure, raw electricity shoot across her skin. Alexander took the card, but didn't move. His eyes studied her with unnerving intensity. "How long have you worked here?" The question caught her completely off guard. "5 years, sir." "And always the night shift?" "Most of the time, yes." He tilted his head slightly, as if processing that information with the same rigor he used to analyze complex corporate mergers. "Must be lonely." Leah didn't know how to respond. There was something in the way he spoke. It wasn't condescension, nor was it superficial curiosity. It was as if he genuinely saw past the uniform, past the invisible front desk clerk who served important guests every day. "Sometimes," she admitted quietly, surprised by her own honesty. Alexander's gaze softened almost imperceptibly, and for a moment that seemed to stretch into an eternity, they just looked at each other. Leah felt her heart accelerate, her cheeks flush, something unknown and terrifying stirring in her chest. "Good night, sir," she finally managed, dropping her gaze. "Good night, Leah. My name is Luma." A small, knowing smile curved his lips. "Good night, Leah." He turned toward the elevators, and Leah finally released the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her legs were trembling, and she had to grip the marble counter to steady herself. What had just happened? Why had that stranger caused such a seismic disruption in her carefully guarded body and emotions? The next morning, as her shift ended and the rising sun began to paint the sky a soft orange, Leah was crossing the lobby with a stack of documents to file. She was distracted, thinking about her grandmother who had called earlier, asking when she'd visit back in Oklahoma. when her own tired feet betrayed her. The papers flew into the air like dry leaves caught in a whirlwind. "Shoot!" she muttered, quickly bending to gather them. "Let me help you." Leah's head snapped up, and she found Alexander kneeling beside her, already collecting documents with quick, efficient movements. He was dressed casually now, a simple gray shirt and dark jeans, but he still exuded that magnetic aura that had left her utterly undone the night before. "You don't have to, Mr. Vance. I can—" "Alexander, and of course I do." "Tu puotu." It was practically in my path. They gathered the papers in silence, yet Leah felt his every movement, as if her own nerves were on fire. When their hands reached for the same document, she felt that electrical shock again. Alexander didn't immediately let go of the paper. Instead, he held her hand for a second longer than was appropriate, his eyes fixed on hers with an intensity that made her forget how to breathe. "You're always in a hurry," he observed. "I have a lot of work. Everyone does. But not everyone carries the weight of the world on their shoulders like you do." Leah blinked, confused, and deeply touched by that observation coming from a complete stranger. "You don't know me, Mr. Vance." He smiled, a small, genuine smile that completely transformed his serious face. "Not yet." He handed her the neat pile of documents and stood up, extending a hand to help her. Leah hesitated for just a second before accepting. His hand was warm, firm, and when he effortlessly pulled her to her feet, she was dangerously close to his body. "Thank you," she whispered. "My pleasure, Leah." The way he pronounced her name, slowly, savoring each syllable, made her stomach flip. Alexander walked toward the hotel exit, but before stepping through the revolving doors, he turned back one last time. "You have eyes that don't belong in this place," he said. And then he was gone, leaving Leah standing in the middle of the lobby, clutching the documents to her chest as if they were the only solid thing in a world that suddenly seemed to be spinning too fast. In the days that followed, Leah noticed a disturbing change in her routine. Alexander began appearing at the front desk with strange frequency for a guest of his stature. First, it was a simple request for restaurant recommendations. Then, questions about tourist spots in New York. Next, inquiries about service hours that he certainly could have solved with a quick call. Leah wasn't naive. She understood the game, even having never played it before. What was most terrifying was that her heart sped up every time she heard that deep voice call her name. Every time those brown eyes studied her, as if she were a mystery worthy of being solved. On the 5th night since his arrival, Alexander showed up at the reception desk at 10 o'clock, after the main rush had settled. He leaned against the marble counter with a practiced casualness. "I need a recommendation," he said. "Of course, Mr. Alexander. How can I help you?" "A place for dinner, but not just any place. It needs to be special." Leah mentally listed the city's most expensive and exclusive restaurants. "There's the Le Bernardin, specializing in seafood, or Daniel, if you prefer French cuisine. Both have Michelin stars, and have you been to either of them?" The question silenced her. "No," she admitted. "They're not exactly compatible with my budget." Alexander leaned in slightly, closing the distance between them. "Then how can you recommend a place you've never experienced yourself?" Leah felt her cheeks burn. "I research, I read reviews, I talk to other guests, but no, I haven't lived it. I haven't felt the taste, the atmosphere, the experience." He was right, but something in the way he challenged her made her blood boil. A strange mix of irritation and fascination. "I can recommend places I do know," she retorted, raising her chin. "But I imagine they wouldn't be to your liking." A glint of amusement flashed in his eyes. "Surprise me." Leah took a piece of paper and scribbled down the address of a tiny hole-in-the-wall Italian joint in Greenwich Village, a simple spot that served the best handmade pasta in the area, where she occasionally went with coworkers. "Don't expect luxury," she said, handing him the paper. "But the food is honest, and the place has soul. Alexander folded the paper carefully and slipped it into his shirt pocket, close to his heart. Honest food and a place with soul, he repeated, his eyes never leaving hers. Sounds perfect. He turned to leave, but stopped after a few steps. Leah? Yes? Thank you for being honest with me. That night, when Leah returned to her small, shared apartment in Queens, she couldn't sleep. Lying in bed, staring at the cracked ceiling that so contrasted with the hotel's marble, she wondered for the first time in years, what if her life could be different? What if this man, as distant from her world as the stars in the sky, truly saw her as he seemed to? But then, her grandmother's voice, full of down-to-earth wisdom, echoed in her mind. Honey, rich men play with the hearts of poor girls and then go back to their own world. Don't confuse attention with intention. Leah shut her eyes tightly, trying to extinguish the image of that smile, of that look that promised things she didn't even know she could desire. But it was too late. Something inside her had already awakened, and there was no turning back. The weekend arrived, bringing the typical hotel rush, vacationing families, honeymooning couples, and executives enjoying time off. Leah barely had time to breathe between check-ins, complaints about towels, and requests for tourist information. But even in the chaos, her mind insisted on searching for a tall figure in a navy suit, for a deep voice that pronounced her name like no one ever had. Alexander didn't appear. Leah scolded herself every time her eyes betrayed her will and searched the reception area, the lobby, the elevators. He's just a guest, she repeated to herself like a mantra. A temporary guest who will soon leave and forget you exist. It was Monday night when everything changed. The hotel manager, Mr. Harrison, a middle-aged man with a prominent gut and an even larger ego, was particularly irritable. An important reservation had been duplicated in the system, and he was hunting for a scapegoat. "Sterling!" he bellowed from the doorway of his office, making Leah jump in her chair. "Here, now!" Leah stood up, her heart pounding. In the reception area, a few guests watched the scene with poorly disguised curiosity. She held her head high and walked to the office, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes. "Mr. Harrison, explain this to me," he roared, turning the computer screen toward her. "The presidential suite was double booked for the same weekend. How did this happen?" Leah examined the records, her brain working fast. "The first reservation was made through the automated website system, sir. The second came in by phone." You didn't what? You didn't check? You didn't do your job correctly?" "I didn't make the second reservation," Leah replied, keeping her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. "It was Brenda from the afternoon shift. It's logged here in the system under her login code." Harrison narrowed his eyes, clearly unsatisfied that he couldn't blame her directly. "Then why didn't you catch the error when you took over the shift?" "Because the system doesn't issue alerts for duplicated reservations when they're made in different sessions, sir. It's a software flaw that has been reported to IT 3 times. The technical and precise answer seemed to irritate him even more. "There's always an excuse, isn't there, Sterling? Always." "Excuse me." The voice cut through the air like a sharp blade. Leah and Harrison turned simultaneously. Alexander was standing in the office doorway, his hands casually tucked into the pockets of his dress pants, his expression calm, but his eyes holding a contained storm. "Mr. Vance!" Harrison immediately changed his posture, puffing out his chest and forcing a subservient smile. "How can I help you?" "You can't," Alexander said, his voice dangerously low. "But it appears there is a misunderstanding here." "A misunderstanding, sir?" Alexander walked to the computer with measured steps. "May I?" Harrison nervously nodded, and Alexander took control of the mouse, his fingers navigating the system with surprising familiarity for someone who, supposedly, had no knowledge of hotel reception work. "As Ms. Sterling correctly pointed out," he said, his eyes scanning the screen. "The first reservation was automatic, at 2:23 p.m. on Saturday. The second was manual, at 5:56 p.m. on the same day, under the responsibility of a different employee. Your system, which I might add is absurdly outdated, lacks real-time integration between modules. This is a structural flaw, not a human one. The silence that followed was so heavy, Leah could hear her own heart pounding. Harrison opened and closed his mouth like a fish out of water. Good. Mr. Vance, I appreciate the analysis, but these are internal hotel matters. Alexander turned to him, and Leah saw for the first time the true authority that this man carried. It wasn't just wealth or power. It was the natural command of someone accustomed to leading, to being obeyed, to not tolerating injustice. Internal matters that result in employees being publicly humiliated for systemic failures, Alexander said, each word landing like a sentence. That's an interesting management policy. Harrison paled. Ms. Sterling made no mistake, and if your system is as flawed as it appears, I suggest you invest in updates instead of looking for scapegoats. Alexander then turned to Leah, and the rigid expression on his face softened minimally. Are you all right? Leah nodded, unable to form words. She felt gratitude, relief, but also a sharp stab of shame at needing to be defended, at being seen in that position of vulnerability. Ms. Sterling, can you return to your post? Harrison muttered, clearly wanting to end the embarrassing situation. Leah left the office on shaky legs, and Alexander followed her. In the lobby, away from curious ears, he gently touched her elbow. Hey, he said softly, you're trembling. Thank you. You didn't have to. Of course I had to. He was wrong. Leah finally raised her eyes to meet his, and what she saw there completely disarmed her. It wasn't pity. It wasn't condescension. It was respect, even admiration. You defended yourself well, Alexander continued. You knew the system. You presented the facts. You kept your composure. Most people would just accept the blame. I learned that if you don't defend yourself, no one else will, Leah said, her voice coming out more bitter than she intended. That's not true. No, because I just did. The gaze between them stretched out, charged with something undefined, but undeniable. Leah felt her heart race again, but this time it wasn't just physical attraction. It was something deeper, more dangerous. It was connection. Why? She whispered. Why did you do that? Alexander took a step forward, further decreasing the distance between them. He was close enough for her to smell his cologne. Why? He echoed. Because you, Leah, are rare. You're competent, honest, and you don't seek the spotlight. And when someone tries to diminish that, it irritates me deeply. You don't know me. Leah repeated the same words from days ago, but now they sounded less like an affirmation and more like a question. Then let me. Before Leah could respond, the reception phone rang, shattering the moment. She instinctively moved away, creating a safe distance. I have to work. Right, but Leah? Yes? Tomorrow night, 8:00 p.m. Hotel restaurant. Dinner with me. It wasn't a request. It wasn't an order. It was somewhere in between, an invitation that sounded like a promise. I don't know if I can. Dinner. Just that. Two people talking. Leah bit her bottom lip, her mind screaming all the reasons why this was a terrible idea, her heart whispering all the reasons why she should say yes. Two people talking, she echoed. Exactly. All right. 8 p.m. The smile that lit up Alexander's face was the most beautiful thing Leah had ever seen. That night, after her shift, Leah called her grandmother, the phone trembling in her hands. Grandma, I think I did something really hard. What is it, my girl? I accepted a dinner invitation. With a very important man. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy with meaning. Is this man, is he kind? I think so. He defended me today. He treats me like I matter. And do you like him? Leah closed her eyes, stubborn tears threatening to fall. I don't know what like is, Grandma. I never, ever let myself before. But when he looks at me, I feel like I could be more than I am, and that terrifies me. Listen to me, Leah Sterling." Her grandmother's voice became firm, full of love and concern. "I raised you to be strong, to not depend on a man. But I didn't raise you to be afraid of living. If this man makes you feel more, then find out what that more means. Just don't forget who you are in the process." Those words echoed in Leah's mind as she prepared for bed. Don't forget who she was. But who was she, after all? The small-town girl who worked hard? The invisible receptionist? Or was there something more? Something dormant, waiting to awaken? The dinner. The next day, Leah worked on autopilot, her thoughts constantly drifting to the approaching evening. Her shift was supposed to end at 7:30 p.m. But Mr. Harrison, still resentful from the previous day, overloaded her with last-minute tasks. When she finally managed to break free, it was 8:15 p.m. She ran to the staff locker room, swapped her uniform for a simple navy dress she kept for emergencies, and let down her hair, which she usually kept tied back. She put on a little mascara. Her reflection in the mirror surprised her. Without the uniform, with her hair loose and her face framed, she looked different, vulnerable, feminine, afraid. When she arrived at the hotel restaurant, it was 8:27 p.m. Alexander was seated at a corner table near the windows, with a view of the city lights. He wore a black shirt that accentuated his broad shoulders, and when he saw her, he immediately stood up. "I'm sorry I'm late. You're perfect," he interrupted. And the way he said it, with such raw sincerity, made Leah forget all her nervousness. He pulled out the chair for her, a chivalrous gesture Leah had only seen in movies. When she sat down, her hands were trembling slightly. "Nervous?" Alexander asked, reclaiming his seat. "Terrified," Leah admitted with a weak laugh. "Welcome to the club." She looked up, surprised. "You? Nervous? You have no idea." The waiter brought the menus, but Alexander didn't even look at them. "May I order for us?" Leah nodded, watching in fascination as he spoke to the waiter in fluent Italian, ordering dishes she couldn't even pronounce. When they were alone again, she couldn't contain her curiosity. "How many languages do you speak?" "5 fluently, 3 reasonably well." "My God," Alexander smiled. "It's not talent, it's necessity. International business demands it. But tell me about you. The small-town girl who came to the city and landed a job in one of the best hotels in New York." "There's not much to tell. I doubt that." And then, maybe it was the wine the waiter served. Maybe it was the way Alexander looked at her, with genuine, non-judgmental interest. Leah started to talk. She spoke about the grandmother who raised her after losing her parents in a car accident when she was only 5. About growing up in a town so small that everyone knew everyone's name. About the decision to leave everything at 18 to try for a different life in New York. "And you weren't scared?" Alexander asked, leaning forward. "I was terrified, but Grandma always said that fear is just a feeling, not a plan of action. So I came. Got a job at the first hotel that hired me, rented a tiny room, and here I am." "Here you are," he repeated softly. "A survivor. I'm not special. You don't understand, Leah. Most people spend their whole lives talking about dreams, about change, about courage. You simply lived it. That is extraordinary." No one had ever described her life that way. To Leah, everything had always been about necessity, survival. But in Alexander's voice, it sounded like heroism. "What about you?" she dared to ask. "What's it like being you?" Alexander laughed, a deep, genuine sound that made something warm inside her. "You want to know what it's like to be me?" "I do." He became serious then, his eyes locked on hers. "It's lonely, Leah, very lonely. You're always surrounded by people, but none of them really see you. They see the money, the power, the opportunities. But you, the real person, become invisible. Leah felt a pang in her chest. She knew that loneliness, even if it came from a completely opposite place. "I see you," she said, before she could stop herself. His eyes widened minimally, and for a moment Leah saw vulnerability there, something she bet few people had ever witnessed. "I know," Alexander whispered. "That's why I'm here." The dinner stretched for hours. They talked about books. Leah loved historical romances. Alexander preferred biographies. About music, she listened to everything. He had a predilection for jazz. About dreams, Leah wanted to open her own boutique hotel one day. Alexander wanted to retire young and travel the world. 35 years old, she said. Build enough until then, and then live. Do you think you can separate them like that? Build and live? Alexander paused with his wine glass halfway to his lips. No one has ever asked me that. Maybe because the answer is obvious. What would that be? That you can't. That life is now, not later. That if you spend all those years just building, you might forget how to live. The silence that followed was charged with weight. Alexander watched her with a new intensity, as if she had just said something profound he had never considered. "You're 23, he finally said. "How the hell are you so wise?" "I'm not wise. I just learned that tomorrow isn't guaranteed. My parents died driving back from the grocery store. One second they were alive, the next they weren't. So I try to live every day like it's the only one I have." Alexander reached his hand across the table, and after a moment of hesitation, Leah placed hers over his. The touch was simple, but the electricity between them was undeniable. "Leah Sterling," he said, his voice husky. "You're turning my world upside down." "I don't want to turn anything upside down," she whispered. "I just want—" "What?" "I don't know. Something real, something true. And what if I promise you this is real? That you're not a distraction, not a whim?" Leah felt tears prick her eyes. "Then I'd say I'm terrified of what that means." Alexander squeezed her hand gently. "Welcome back to the club." When they left the restaurant, it was already past midnight. Alexander walked her to the employee entrance, a simple gesture that meant everything. "Leah?" "Yes. I'll be in New York for 3 more weeks. 3 weeks to find out if this is real, or if it's just chemistry." "Much more than chemistry?" "Yeah." She nodded, her heart a mix of hope and terror. 3 weeks. 3 weeks. He calmed her, and then, before Leah could brace herself, Alexander leaned in and gently kissed her forehead. A chaste, almost reverent kiss that somehow meant more than any physical contact. "Good night, Leah." "Good night, Alexander." When she finally got home, she lay in bed and allowed the tears to come. Not out of sadness, but out of something she couldn't name. Fear, hope, desire, terror, all mixed in a whirlwind that left her dizzy and euphoric at the same time. 3 weeks. 3 weeks to find out if a billionaire CEO and a small-town receptionist could really build something real. 3 weeks for Leah to discover if she was ready to risk her heart for the first time in her life. And as she drifted off to sleep, with a small smile on her face despite the fears, she had no idea that those 3 weeks would change her life in ways she could never imagine. But something inside her already knew. There was no going back. The awakening had begun. The moment of truth. The following days unfolded like a fever dream that Leah didn't want to wake up from. Alexander began frequenting the reception desk with disconcerting regularity, always with a plausible excuse. He needed information about meetings, service confirmations, recommendations for places to visit. But his eyes told a different story every time they rested on her. "Good morning, Leah," became her favorite phrase, uttered in that deep voice that made her stomach flutter. Her co-workers began to notice. "Girl, what's going on between you and the guy in the presidential suite?" whispered Brenda during a shift change, her eyes wide with curiosity. "He practically lives down here." Leah felt her face flush. "Nothing. He's polite. That's all." "Polite?" "Leah, he looks at you like you're the only person in the hotel. On the planet, even." "You're exaggerating. I'm watching, and I'm not the only one." The words echoed in Leah's mind. She knew she was playing with fire, that allowing this closeness was dangerous in every way. But when Alexander appeared, with that subtle smile just for her, all sensible reasons evaporated like dew in the sun. On Wednesday, he came down at 9 in the evening carrying a book. "Brought something for you," he said, placing the volume on the marble counter. Leah looked at the worn cover of 100 Years of Solitude. "You mentioned you wanted to read it but never had time to find a copy. This is my personal copy. It has notes in the margins, folded pages, coffee spilled on page 47. It's a bit of a mess, but it's perfect," Leah whispered, reverently running her fingers over the cover. No one had ever done anything like that for her. Remember a casual comment and turn it into such a meaningful gesture. "Page 89, underlined in red," Alexander said, already moving away. "My favorite part." When he disappeared into the elevator, Leah quickly opened the book to the indicated page. There, underlined in red, were the words, "He did not yet understand the value of the tenacity that she was beginning to feel for him." Leah slammed the book shut, her heart pounding so loud she was certain the guests in the lobby could hear it. On Thursday, it was her turn to surprise him. Leah found out through the housekeeper that Alexander liked his coffee black, with no sugar, always at 3 p.m., a time when he usually took a break between meetings. So, she prepared a special coffee in the employee break room machine, the best blend, made exactly right, and asked a waitress to deliver it with a simple note. Just L. 20 minutes later, her phone vibrated with a text from an unknown number. "How did you get my number?" She texted back, smiling. "I have my resources. How is the coffee?" "Impossible. Better than the restaurants." "Fact. Because you made it thinking of me." Leah leaned against the water cooler, phone pressed to her chest, grinning like a silly teenager. She was losing herself, falling, and the most frightening part was that she didn't want to stop. On Friday, Alexander showed up with a proposition. "I need to go to Boston for a business meeting tomorrow. Come with me." Leah blinked. You blinked. "What? Just for the day. We'll leave early. Come back in the evening. The meeting will be in Italian, and I wanted someone to help me with notes." "Alexander, I don't speak Italian." "You don't need to. I just need you there." His eyes pleaded in a way that had nothing to do with business. "You want me to go to a meeting with you as a note-taker?" "As company. As the only person in this city with whom I can have a conversation that doesn't involve percentages and stocks." Leah bit her lip, her mind screaming all the sensible reasons to refuse. But her heart, that traitor, had already decided. "All right, but I work Saturday night. I already spoke to the manager. He agreed to cover your shift." "You what?" Alexander shrugged, an almost boyish gesture coming from such a serious man. "I said I needed urgent translation services. I didn't lie. You're helping me translate signals I forgot how to read." "What signals?" "The ones from the heart." The answer was so sincere, so devoid of games, that Leah felt her final defenses crumble. "What time?" 6 in the morning. Wear something comfortable." On Saturday morning, Leah was ready by 5:45 a.m., wearing jeans, a simple white top, and sneakers. When she came downstairs and saw Alexander's car, a gleaming black Mercedes, she almost ran back. "Hey," he said, getting out of the car and walking towards her. "You look beautiful." "I look normal." "Exactly." The drive to Boston would take about 4 hours, and during the trip, Leah discovered sides of Alexander she hadn't seen before. He hummed softly while driving, laughed at the bad jokes she told, pointed out pretty scenery, and said things like, "Look at that sunrise," even though it was 7 in the morning. "That's not a sunset, it's a sunrise," she corrected him, laughing. "Same difference. It's beautiful. You really are terrible with normal conversation, aren't you?" Alexander laughed, that sound she was learning to love. "Terribly terrible. That's why I need you. To remind me that there are things beyond spreadsheets and shareholder meetings." The meeting took place at a waterfront resort, in a private room overlooking the ocean. Leah sat discreetly in the corner, while Alexander negotiated in Italian with 3 older executives. She didn't understand the words, but she understood the body language. Alexander was dominant without being aggressive, confident without being arrogant. He commanded that room with the ease of someone born to lead. When they finished, it was past noon, and Alexander dismissed the driver who was waiting. "Shall we have lunch?" They went to a clam shack by the water, a simple place, very different from the sophisticated establishments Alexander frequented. They ordered grilled fish, rice, tantoze, and salad. Simple, honest, delicious food. "You're different here," Leah observed, studying him. "How so?" "More light. As if you can actually breathe." Alexander was still for a moment, his eyes fixed on the sea. "You know when you wear a mask for so long that you forget what your real face looks like? It's like that. In New York, in meetings, at business dinners, I wear that mask, but here, with you, I don't have to." "Why?" He turned to her, and the intensity in his eyes stole her breath. "Because you don't want anything from me, other than who I truly am." Leah didn't know how to respond. How could she explain that she wanted everything from him? The businessman, the vulnerable human being, the dreamer hidden behind the corporate armor. After lunch, they walked on the beach. Alexander took off his dress shoes and rolled up his pants. It was such an incongruous image that Leah laughed. "What is it?" he asked. "You, Alexander Vance, terror of the financial markets, walking barefoot on the sand." He smiled. "Maybe this is the real me. Maybe it is." They sat down on the sand, watching the waves break. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in orange and pink hues. Alexander was sitting so close that Leah could feel the warmth emanating from his body. "Leah, I need to tell you something," he finally said. "I'm listening." "No, I'm not good at this. With feelings, with vulnerability. I've been trained my whole life to be rational, to not let emotions interfere with decisions. But you," he paused, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration. "You completely destabilize me. When I'm near you, nothing I learned makes sense, and I don't know if that's wonderful or terrifying." Leah turned to him, gathering courage she didn't know she possessed. "It's both. It is wonderful and terrifying. It's awakening feelings you've spent your life avoiding. It's realizing that control is an illusion, and that, sometimes, the best thing you can do is just feel." Alexander looked at her as if she had just solved the most complex enigma in the universe. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "Say exactly what I need to hear. I just tell the truth." And then, without warning, without drama, Alexander leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't a delicate first-date kiss. It was hunger, need, months of loneliness being broken through in a single moment. Leah responded with equal intensity, her hands tangling in his hair, the whole world disappearing until it was just the two of them. That beach, that moment, suspended in time. When they finally separated, both were breathless. "I'm sorry," Alexander whispered. "I didn't mean to." "Don't apologize," Leah interrupted, her voice husky. "Don't ruin this by apologizing." He chuckled softly, resting his forehead against hers. "You're incredible." "No, you are." "No, you, completely, absolutely you." They remained that way for long minutes, just breathing the same air, feeling each other's heartbeats, processing what had just happened between them. When they returned to New York, night had fallen. Alexander insisted on driving her all the way to her apartment. In the small building's parking lot, he turned off the engine, but made no move to get out. "Leah, I don't want to pressure you, but I need you to know that this isn't a game for me. It's not a pastime." "What is it then?" He held her face between his hands, his thumbs caressing her cheeks. "It's the most real thing I've ever felt in my life." Leah closed her eyes, stubborn tears escaping. "I'm scared." "Me too. What if it doesn't work? What if our worlds are too incompatible? What if it does? What if our worlds complement each other in ways we can't even imagine?" She opened her eyes, meeting his through her tears. "Do you really believe that?" "With every part of me." Leah took a deep breath. "Then let's try." "Try?" "Yes, us. What do you want that to be?" The smile that illuminated Alexander's face was like watching the sunrise. "Us," he repeated. "I like how that sounds." They kissed again, slower this time, savoring, memorizing. When Leah finally got out of the car, she felt as if she were floating. But upon entering the empty apartment, reality began to seep in. She, Leah Sterling, a hotel receptionist who split rent with 2 roommates to pay the bills, was involved with a billionaire, a man whose world had nothing to do with hers. How could that possibly work out? Her phone vibrated. A text from Alexander. "Missing you already?" She smiled despite the fears. "Me too." "Tomorrow?" "Tomorrow." Leah sat on the narrow bed, hugging her pillow, her body still vibrating with the memory of those kisses. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know if she was making the right choice. But for the first time in her life, Leah Sterling was choosing to live instead of just survive. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. For now, it was enough. The profound lesson. The story continues with their relationship developing, the challenges of their different worlds, the betrayal by the manager, Mr. Harrison, the final decision to separate for Leah's self-discovery, her return to Oklahoma, her self-reconstruction, the second chance encounter, their renewed relationship, the final argument, the grandmother's heart attack, the engagement, the unexpected pregnancy, and the beautiful wedding on the beach. And the story skips forward to the final lesson, which is the most crucial part of the user's request, based on the translated original content. 10 years after they were married, Leah was in the foundation's office. It now had 3 branches in different states, when Alexander appeared with an envelope. "What is this?" she asked. "Open it." Inside was a photograph. That very first photo someone had taken of them, without their knowledge, in the lobby of the Grand Imperial Hotel. Alexander looking at her with that intensity, Leah flushed and beautiful in her uniform. "Where did you find this?" "I asked the security team. I wanted something to remember where we started." Leah traced the faces in the photo with her finger, so young, so scared, so unaware of the journey ahead of them. "Do you regret it?" she asked, echoing the question he had asked years ago. Alexander pulled her close, kissing her hair. "Never. Not for a second. Even with all the chaos, the difficulties, the imperfections, especially because of them. Because they made us who we are today." From the foundation garden came the sound of laughter. Their daughter, Mariana, was playing with the girls from the mentorship program. 10 years old, already showing the same empathy and kindness that defined her parents. "We did a good job," Leah said. "We did," Alexander agreed. "And we're still doing it, because our story doesn't truly end. It's continuous. It unfolds. It grows." Leah rested her head on his shoulder, a profound peace settling over her. Her journey, from the invisible receptionist who ran from life to the CEO, who built an empire of meaning, was the ultimate testament. The most terrifying, yet most rewarding lesson of all is this. True love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone imperfect and deciding that their imperfections are perfect for you. And the greatest courage isn't never having fear. It's having fear and choosing to love anyway. Because a life lived fully is worth every single risk.